Hey, what's up, you guys? It's your girl Lilium here, and today I'm going to finally read you another creepypasta. You can listen maybe in bed or at your office, in school, wherever you have time to get creeped out and maybe a little bit relaxed too. So the video I'm going to be reading today is called Sniff, and it was posted to creepypasta.com the 9th of November 2016. So if you're ready, let's begin. I never liked Rustic Gables Skilled Nursing Facility. Years ago, I worked as an EMT for Meditrans ambulance service. We did inter-facility transports, mostly dialysis runs and hospital discharges. So I spent a lot of time around crappy nursing homes. But even with my bar set as low as it was, Rustic Gables SNF still managed to underwhelm. The 4-story building itself put off an air of hostility. Near 6th and Alvarado, in a slummy corner of Westlake, Rustic Gables SNF sat like a deceased tooth, a squat, square, filthy white structure jutting out of a narrow, uneven parking lot surrounded by a 14-foot fence. Inside, Rustic Gables was, well, exactly how you'd expect. The residents were crammed 4 to a 2-small room. Every August, half the ancient window air units broke down. Their 1.5-star rating was on display over the reception desk, and I'm pretty sure they only managed the extra half-star because someone knew how to BS the inspector. The faceless healthcare conglomerate that owned the place had bought the property from a bank auction. I'd never leave anyone I loved at Rustic Gables SNF. Rustic Gables burned through nurses like cheap cigarettes. It seemed like every time I approached a nursing station, I was greeted by a different young woman in stained scrubs. Meanwhile, my partner and I would run into ex-Rustic Gables employees everywhere we went. Dialysis centers, hospitals, other SNFs. It was rumored that Rustic Gables was haunted. Stories were told of eerie voices behind patients' closed doors, of strangers seen wandering the halls, of objects moving by themselves, and of staff members somehow teleporting themselves all over the facility without realizing it. I heard more than one tale in which the teller swore they'd seen a nurse walk into a patient's room, fail to reappear, then be found on the next floor up, swearing she hadn't been near the patient's room in hours. Once, a patient had been killed when a nurse gave her a second dose of metoprolol, sending her into hypovolemic shock. The guilty nurse swore that she'd spoken to the medical director in person and that he'd given her orders for the extra dose. That was obviously bullshit. The medical director had been in his office miles away with multiple witnesses. But the nurse was insistent, even after she'd pled guilty to avoid jail time. I highly doubted that incident was the work of ghosts. A hangover was a more likely culprit. But even the most skeptical of the ex-nurses agreed they'd gotten a bad vibe working at Rustic Gables, especially at night. In early 2010, my wife Lily told me she'd gotten a job at Rustic Gables as a Sniff. I warned her that everybody who worked there hated the place and offered to continue paying the lion's share of our bills until she could find another employment. You want me to say fuck you to a full-time nursing job with benefits? She snapped, squishing her mouth into a pissy little bow. I'm sick of working at Subway. Do you honestly think anyone else is going to offer me anything with no experience? She had me there. The oversaturated medical job market of Los Angeles was a tough spot for a recently graduated licensed vocational nurse, especially in the middle of a recession. I get it, I told her, but I'm making enough money now, and I don't think you're going to like Rustic Gables much. People say it's haunted and you hate horror. Lily flashed me a condescending, pursed lip smile. She knew I hated that smile. She was a tiny girl, my wife, barely 5 feet tall and maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. Her eyes were oval-shaped and deep-set in her square face. She had long, dark, silky hair. A clump of it fell over an eye. But you're not making enough money, Cyrus, she chirped, as though I were a retarded kindergartner. And I'd rather hang out with Casper the Friendly Ghost than ask my dad for money. Again. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. She was baiting me. Her parents didn't like me much because I didn't have a college degree and my parents were alcoholic white trash. And her father had loaned us money twice in the last year. Once the previous January, when we signed the lease and had to cough up first and deposit for our microscopic Koreatown 1-bedroom, and once in August when my car broke down. Fine, Lil, I said through clenched teeth. Do what you want. With that, I went to shower and get ready for bed. Our marriage was doomed. We both knew it, but neither of us had the balls to give that final nail in the coffin, the mighty whack it needed. Lily took the job. A couple days later, during her second training shift, my partner Rivera and I were sent to Rustic Gables to pick up a patient who, of course, lived on the first floor where Lily was stationed. Our patient was a bed-confined octogenarian going to St. Vincent for a G2 placement. It should have been a quick, drama-free call, but the nurses didn't have the paperwork done yet. Lily was being a complete asshole about it, hanging over the shoulder of the charge nurse, smiling her noxious, pursed lip smile as her new friend berated us over the pickup time as though it were our fault they didn't have their shit together. Rivera went to the ambulance to charge his phone. I'd grit my teeth so hard my skull hurt, and a half glance at Lily's haughty profile was enough to propel bolts of pain up my jaw. For the sake of professionalism and my sanity, I walked away. I wandered to the mismatched front lobby, and there I found a shriveled old woman with dyed orange hair curled up on a stained couch. A nasal cannula dangled from her face, attached to an oxygen canister on the back of a rickety wheelchair. Her eyes snapped open. When she saw me, her face fell. "How are you, ma'am?" I asked sweetly. "Do you need help?" She mumbled something, her voice weak. I hunched beside her and asked her to repeat what she said. "I'm waiting for Scott." I looked around. "Is Scott your nurse? I can find him if you want." She shook her head sadly. "He comes here at night. He talks to me. I've got to stay here or I won't see him." I breathed in and found that the lobby had a weird smell to it. Kind of rotten, but kind of sweet, like the funk that filled our station when the shared fridge was opened. The orange-haired lady didn't seem bothered by it, but I was relieved to see Rivera around the corner, paperwork in hand. I came home after Lily. She pretended to be asleep. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. Perfect situation, I thought. Now we never have to talk. A couple of weeks later, my company picked up other dialysis patient out of Rustic Gables, Sniff. Soon Rivera and I were sent to get him. On the way in, I spotted the same orange-haired woman on the same stained couch, still waiting for Scott. The new dialysis patient, let's call him Herbert Smith, was 79 and not doing well. He was bedbound due to the lingering effects of his stroke, half-blind and atrophied. He looked in my general direction when I called his name, but responded to all further inquiries with incomprehensible muttering. His room, happily, was on the 3rd floor, which put a whole story between me and Lily. We got him loaded in the ambulance, and after a set of vitals, I took advantage of the 15-minute drive to Western Dialysis to finish some paperwork. Herbert Smith stared mindlessly ahead, seemingly unaware of my presence. Then he mumbled something. I looked up from my writing. "What's that, Herbert?" I asked loudly. "The one-legged man talks to me," he repeated. I leaned in. "Who talks to you, Herbert?" "The Oriental man. The man with one leg. He comes into my room at night." Herbert's milky eyes were unfocused, staring vacuously into some point between the road and the ceiling of the ambulance. "The Oriental man, huh?" I pressed indulgently. "He's angry with me," Herbert continued, speaking into oblivion. "He knows I left him. I wish he'd go away." That night, I came home to every light in the apartment on and Lily in the kitchen, making a cup of tea. This was a surprise, as she'd gotten into the habit of feigning sleep. On the rare occasions she'd exchanged a few words with me, she'd done so with a constipated pout, as though my presence was physically painful. "You're still awake, Lil?" I asked without thinking. I immediately realized the stupidity of the question and braced for the sarcastic answer. But the nasty remark didn't come. "Yeah," Lily replied nonchalantly. "I have a headache." She looked at me. For the first time in a while, I didn't see contempt in her eyes. I realized all of a sudden that I no longer remembered how to act around Lily without picking a fight or continuing one. Then I thought of something. "Lily," I asked, "the old woman who's always waiting on the chair by the door, with the bright orange hair and the oxygen, who's she?" Lily frowned. "Her name is Greta. She's in my station. She's pretty far gone." "I talked to her," I said. "She said she was waiting for Scott." "Oh, I know," Lily shook her head. "Scott's not coming. He was Greta's son. He died of cancer 5 years ago. There's pictures of him all around her room." This piece of information jolted me. I remembered the look in Greta's eyes when I'd woken her. Pure happiness, then immediate disappointment when she realized I was not, in fact, her long-deceased child. Poor old bird. Dementia is a bitch. I thought that night was a fluke, as far as my and Lily's relationship was concerned. Lily, tired and in pain, hadn't had the energy to antagonize me, but the next night I came home to awake her again and decidedly unantagonistic, and the next, and the next. One night I came home to find her huddled on the couch, shaking, the glow from the muted TV illuminating her tears. My first impulse was to run. I'd forgotten how to comfort Lily, but I'm not an impulsive person. What came next was the first honest conversation we'd had in months. Lily had been on edge for weeks. Work was the problem. Her shifts at Rustic Gables had been both physically and mentally unbearable for reasons she couldn't justify to herself, let alone anybody else. As soon as I walk in, my chest tightens up and I start feeling weak, she said. I'm scared of something, but I don't know what it is. And whenever I'm alone, I hear things, little noises behind me. But when I turn, there's nothing there. I reiterated that she could leave, that I'd pay the bills, that I'd known other nurses who'd left because the place was too creepy. But Lily shook her head decisively. She wasn't batshit, and if she quit after working at Rustic Gables for barely a month, she'd appear flaky. The next day was Herbert Smith's dialysis day, and Rivera and I were the crew sent to pick him up. The young nurse on duty told me he was being showered. We'd have to wait a few minutes. I considered going to find Lily. Then I was drawn to a feature of Herbert Smith's room I hadn't noticed. There was a bulletin board on the wall parallel to his bed, and someone had pinned up several old newspaper clippings. I looked closer. Herbert had been a medic during the Korean War. One article titled "Wounded Hero Welcomed Home" described his commendable service. He'd found a young soldier with a chest wound lying on the path. All of a sudden, bullets started flying around them. He pulled the soldier into a ditch, patched him up, and waited with him until they were found by an American platoon. While Herbert was hailed as a hero, he had regrets about the incident. He'd seen another man, a Korean villager, lying on the ground with a nasty wound in his leg. The man was writhing, but too weak to remove himself from danger. Herbert had been conflicted, but he could still hear gunshots, and, following protocol, he stayed put. By the time help arrived, the Korean man had died. The article included pictures taken by a soldier in the platoon. In one of them, you could just make out the face of the dead Korean in the background. I remembered Herbert's comments about the Oriental man with one leg, the one who he hadn't gone back for. As long as I'd known him, Herbert hadn't looked great, but I was surprised at just how severely his health had deteriorated. His atrophied limbs had become skeletal, his skin was translucent, and he'd lost hair. His cloudy eyes didn't even flicker as we lifted him from his bed to the gurney. I drove that day. Rivera sat in the back with Herbert. As we wheeled the old man in, I asked Rivera if he'd said anything strange in the back. Rivera gave me a weird look. He wasn't aware Herbert could speak at all. Herbert was completely unresponsive as we placed him in his dialysis chair. He slumped to one side. We propped him up with a pillow. While Rivera chased a tech for a signature, I wrapped the blood pressure cuff attached to the dialysis machine around Herbert's arm. Before I knew what was happening, Herbert Smith was clutching my bicep. I jumped. The old man kept hold, his grip stronger than his spindly fingers should have allowed. His milky white eyes bored into mine. The Oriental man says he's going to take me with him. I wrenched my arm out of his grasp. Herbert went limp and flopped over. I called his name, but his ashen face drooped dumbly, and his liquid eyes were dull. Whoever had spoken to me was locked off, signed out, no longer in the building. 45 minutes into dialysis, Herbert violently tore the blood-filled tubes from his arm. The staff attempted to stop the bleeding, but he fought them off with an alarming level of ferocity. It was said that Herbert Smith never looked so peaceful as he had while being carried out by paramedics, already into irreversible shock. He died before they made it to the hospital. I remained ignorant as this was going on. Rivera and I ran a few more calls. I drove in and out of hospital parking lots, pondering Herbert's Korean ghost. Later, around 6, I received a text from Lily. That was hot, Sai. smiley face. It was a weird thing to say. I assumed she meant our conversation the night before, responded with a single smiley face, and thought about it all afternoon. For months, I'd wanted Lily gone. I'd fantasized about coming home and discovering she'd moved out. But when I read that text, I felt a little twinge of the ecstasy she'd inspired in me when we were 18 and obsessed with each other. As soon as I walked into our apartment, Lily jumped me. Wordlessly, passionately, we made love on the couch. Her perfume, her red lipstick, her hair tickling my skin was intoxicating. It was instinctive, animalistic. When we finished, we lay entangled on the couch, strands of her hair still in my mouth. "That was amazing," I muttered to her. "I'm so glad we did that." "You started it," she teased, running her hand across my chest. "And that was a pretty hot kiss." The charge nurse was pissed, but it was worth it. "What's the charge nurse got to do with anything?" I asked innocently. Lily pulled away and she sat up. "You came to see me at Rustic Gables. You kissed me right in front of the other nurses." I went cold. "Lily," I said, "I didn't do that. I was at Rustic Gables in the morning to pick up Mr. Smith, but I didn't see you at all. I didn't kiss you." She forced a laugh. "Sigh, stop fucking joking. Unless you've got a twin I don't know about. You kissed me today. The other nurses all saw." "I don't know what to tell you, Lil," I said. "I was on the 3rd floor for like 15 minutes, then in the ambulance the rest of the day." Lily glared. Shoving me out of the way, she grabbed her clothes and stood up. "Fuck you, Cyrus. You're a fucking liar." With that, she stomped to our bedroom and slammed the door. In the morning, she was gone before I woke up. The whole thing bothered me. Apparently, Lily had been passionately kissed in front of her co-workers by a guy who looked just like me. I had long suspected she had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, but I might have been wrong. Maybe undiagnosed schizophrenia. Two days later, Rivera and I were sent for Herbert Smith. The nurse at Rustic Gables told us he was dead. Rivera went to call dispatch and tell them that, in fact, our services were not needed. I waited with the gurney in the front lobby. Orange-haired Greta was curled up on the couch, presumably still waiting for Scott. Poor lady. I tried to catch her eye, but she was oblivious to my presence. Then I saw tears running down her face. I would have gone to talk to her if a hand hadn't jerked my arm. I whirled around and found myself face to face with Lily. Her eyes were puffy and bloodshot. She was pissed. "There you are," she snapped. "What the fuck, Cyrus? You're messing with me now." "Lily, what are you talking about?" "I heard you calling my name," she said, unable to control the tremble in her voice. "Down the hall, in that fucking creepy voice. Where were you hiding? Under a bed or something?" "Lily, I didn't do that. I've been here." "It was your voice," Lily insisted, saying, "Lily, come to me. I was handing out meds and I heard you. I'm so sick of your fucking jokes." "Lily, I started. "Fuck you, Cyrus. I want a divorce." With that, she stomped back to the nurse's station. I didn't go after her. I stood there, useless, fuming. All the anger and resentment I'd been nursing for months, the frustration of never, ever being good enough for Lily, swirled around me like a tornado. I wanted her dead. I wanted to wrap my fingers around her neck and stare into her protruding eyes until they glazed over. If Vera hadn't come to tell me that we had another call, I'm not sure what I would have done. We spent the rest of the night with one of the respiratory therapists, wedging a 400-pound ventilator-dependent vegetable onto our gurney and driving him into a crappy post-acute in Silmar. As we drove back to station, I saw I had missed 2 calls from Lily and that she had left me a voice message. I ignored it. Even thinking about her jacked my blood pressure. Lily didn't come home that night, and I was relieved. The next morning, I was dismayed to see the address of Rusty Gables flash across our pager. We were picking up a psych patient, an old lady with dementia waking out, going to the Brotman psychiatric ward. The name of the patient was Greta, the orange-haired lady in the lobby, always waiting for Scott. It started a little after midnight, the charge nurse told me. All of a sudden she was screaming and crying. I've never heard anything like it. Just this anguished, otherworldly wailing. Had she had any change in medications recently? I asked. The nurse shook her head. Her son Scott died about 5 years ago. She was very devoted to him, and she'd been telling some of the nurses that he comes and sees her at night. I nodded sympathetically. Anyways, the nurse continued. Last night, she kept on screaming Scott's name over and over. We got her into bed and gave her a sleeping pill, but it didn't take. She woke up around 3, dragged herself out of bed and into the hallway. We found her pawing at the door of a storage closet. They had Greta restrained to the bed, unnecessarily so I thought, as whatever sedative they'd given her had reduced her to a near comatose state. We moved her onto the gurney without issue, but in the back of the ambulance she squirmed around and opened her eyes. She threw a languid look in my direction. So, Greta, I said kindly, hoping my voice would keep her quiet. How are you doing today? Have the nurses been treating you good? Scott came to me, she said emotionlessly. The words hit me like a punch. Let's not talk about Scott, okay? He was burning, Greta continued, as though she hadn't heard me. His face was melting. He was screaming in pain. Tears welled in her eyes. Then it wasn't Scott anymore. It was this monster, this demon. And he told me that's what Scott looked like in hell. She sobbed. I might have said something comforting. If I did, it had no effect. I don't remember. At that moment, I had never been more disturbed in my entire life. Greta didn't speak again. She just cried, tears and snot collecting in her wrinkles. She cried all the way to Brotman and kept on crying as we waited for her room to be ready. We heard her moans as we pulled our gurney down the 6th floor hall until the elevator doors closed. So that was the first part of Sniff, and make sure to check out part 2, which will be uploaded soon, and I'll put a link to that in the description. Bye guys, see you soon.